Hey, Melissa.
Hey.
Another episode.
Here we are again.
I know. It's number 4. So I like what we're doing. I like the direction we're going. Definitely want to shout out to our listeners because they have definitely picked up the gauntlet.
Yes, it's so good to hear from people that are listening and getting information that they need.
Yeah, and I think, the more that people understand, the better off they'll be and the better decisions they can make for themselves.
Yes.
Yes. So again, Common Sense Medicine with Tim and Melissa.
Yes, here we are.
Here we are. Again, for people who don't know who I am Tim Chen. I'm a family physician. I like integrative medicine. I like population health. I like reading papers like a nerd and dissecting them.
Sending me said papers.
That's right.
To read too.
Yeah, most homework.
Yes.
Yes, and Melissa, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Melissa Wood, family nurse practitioner, also certified in lifestyle medicine. So have an interest in that as well.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the big emphasis today is we're talking about the importance of lifestyle. And so the goal of the podcast, again, is to help people understand complex medical problems. I mean, I feel like every day, Melissa, we talk and we look at each other and we have that look that, I thought this was common sense.
Yes.
I thought
we just need to make it common sense for everybody else.
That's right. We just need people to understand what's going on so they would better know what to do. And of course, today, what we'll be talking about is why people gain weight.
Yes.
Yeah, because last week, we talked about the skinny shot.
Yes.
Very popular, how it works, why it works, but the cost effectiveness of it, the long-term issues with it. Today, we're actually going to go back and look a little bit at why the body gains weight, how the body gains weight. And then once I think we understand why people gain weight and why it's so hard to lose weight, we can talk about how to combat those things.
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. So today we'll be talking about 2 hormones because people want to talk about hormones and maybe even more because I think...
Yeah, I think even more.
Yeah.
But the 2 main ones to start.
That's right. Yes, because we hear a lot of times people say things like, it's my hormones. I'm gaining weight, it's my hormones. And the hormones they're talking about is not the hormones I'm talking about.
Yeah. They're talking about things like thyroid, estrogen, testosterone. They think everything's out of whack.
Right.
So we check it.
Uh-huh.
And everything's normal.
Yeah.
Almost 99.9% of the time.
Girl, I cannot remember the last time I checked someone where I thought, this is probably thyroid, and actually come back as thyroid.
Right. As being the cause of their weight gain. Almost never.
Yeah. And I think what we'll realize after talking about today's podcast, we realize that the lifestyle is actually what's affecting the hormones, not the hormones affecting the lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll talk about all those things. So we'll start off with this matter of these 2 hormones, insulin and cortisol. So for people who are diabetic, they are very familiar with insulin. They should be. If they aren't, we need to make it common sense.
Yes.
But essentially, the job of insulin is to help people store energy. Right? So whenever we eat something, the body breaks it down and absorbs it. And when it absorbs it, it's usually broken down into fatty acids or it's broken down into glucose, which is just sugar. There's a couple of other chemicals in there. We will not bore you with the details. But then what the body does is it releases a hormone called insulin. And insulin's job is to take that sugar and put it inside the cell so that the cell can actually use it for energy. And so you can think of insulin as like a lock and key. So the insulin goes, unlocks the cell, the sugar goes in, and then life goes on. There's no blood sugar in the bloodstream or very little blood sugar in the bloodstream. The body's happy and everything keeps going. But what happens, and what we've noticed, Melissa, is that when we give patients shots of insulin, they actually gain weight.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the dreaded side effects when we do have to end up going to insulin for treatment of diabetes.
Yeah, and exactly. So what happens with insulin also is insulin causes fat cells to grow. Right? And so, and it makes sense. So if you have a storage hormone and you're running out of storage, what the body needs to do is find other place to store it. And so what can happen over time is, let's say we eat a lot, constantly. Right? And we're eating things that make insulin go up. So insulin starts going up, and what you can start developing is something called insulin resistance, right? So before, let's say a cell was empty, and the body takes its sugar and it puts it in, it's putting fine, it's fine, it's working. But now the cell is starting getting full of sugar. right? Kind of like a suitcase. It's starting to get too full of clothes. And so the sugar is starting to spill out more and more. What'll happen is the body will have to increase the amount of insulin it's making to push the sugar in. Before, it was maybe one key, opens the door, puts one sugar in. Now it's 10 keys, open the door, put one sugar in. And so this is what we call insulin resistance. And Melissa, we've actually seen resistance, this concept, in multiple other things like alcohol.
Yeah, just as our body gets more used to being exposed to something, it takes more of that substance to get the same effect. So even for, say, in the example of alcohol, maybe a person gets drunk after 2 beverages, and if they do that every day, eventually it's going to take 3 drinks or 4 drinks or 5 drinks. So that's a good analogy.
Yeah, and so this is essentially, if we think about this scientifically, the higher the insulin level goes, the more resistance it develops, right? So kind of like the more you drink, the more resistance you develop. The more resistance you develop, the more you drink. And so it keeps going on this cycle. And next thing you know, again, this hormone starts getting higher and higher and higher. Fat cells keep getting, growing more and more and more. And we start developing things called metabolic syndrome. And the paper that I sent you, Melissa, which I was reading, essentially says this, that people start developing insulin resistance before they start gaining weight. So we used to think that people would gain weight and then develop insulin resistance. But actually, this whole insulin resistance issue starts happening, and then people start gaining weight.
Yes.
Which is not fun.
That's right.
Which is a problem, And so today, at the end, we'll actually be talking about, okay, now that we know insulin is a problem, what do we do about it? Mm-hmm. Now, hopefully I made that clear. The second hormone we'll be talking about is this hormone called cortisol. Mm-hmm. Now, we've known for a long time cortisol can actually also cause weight gain. There's a disease called Cushing's disease, which is where the body secretes way too much cortisol. And these patients have a very, they look a type of way. Mm-hmm. Moon faces, right? Mm-hmm. Their face is really round, and then huge abdominal obesity, meaning sometimes their arms are really thin, but their stomach is really, really big.
Yes. And you see the same thing with people that are on chronic corticosteroids for whatever reason. If they have a condition that requires that, you see that same sort of look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And so cortisol or corticosteroids or prednisone, you hear these things, that is cortisol, just the synthetic version of it. And back in the day, cortisol, we always know it as a stress hormone. Well, back in the day, we would have high bursts of cortisol, but usually otherwise low levels, meaning like if a wolf was chasing you, your cortisol bursts, right? You get a fight or flight kind of situation, and within 3 minutes, you're either dead by the wolf or you've escaped,
yes.
Right? But now we have kind of chronic low level of cortisol all the time, whether it's stress from work, children, parents not sleeping, lack of exercise. And as this cortisol hormone goes up, its job is to make your body release sugar in the bloodstream, right? Because before, we're running from a wolf, you need to dump all the sugar in the blood so the muscles can use them. Except now, it's constantly dumping sugar, which makes your body constantly make insulin to put the sugar away. And here we are again, back in that insulin cycle.
Right. Yeah, it is just kind of an endless cycle. And just like you said, with stress levels being what they are today versus what we are programmed to be as a human, it's just a lot different than what we've ever seen before. So our stress levels are constantly high rather than that little burst of stress here and there. We're constantly just bombarded with different sources of stress. So that can just be a recipe for that higher cortisol.
Mm-hmm. And it's like you said, now that people used to say I'm so stressed out all the time, I'm eating all the time. And I guess that's also part of the hormone concept. when you're stressed all the time and your stress level is high all the time, and as moms with kids, it's inevitable. Mm-hmm. It's almost part of life. Sometimes people will stress eat. People hear all the time, I'm stress eating. And sometimes that's because the body's I need more energy to fight whatever I'm fighting, except we're not really running from a wolf. We're just running from our children.
Yes. Yes, and we eat for all different kinds of reasons. Sometimes it is that stress relief. Sometimes it's out of habit. It's time to eat, so we eat whether we're really all that hungry at the time or not. And we also eat just out of boredom or pass the time, something to give us a little uplift, because there are some, positive chemical signals that we get from eating certain foods, especially those high sugar, high fat foods. Those are, stimulate those feel good hormones as well.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Back in the day, it's hard to find a grape. I saw this meme, and it was like this guy back in ancient Greece, and he was like, "Oh, the day that would taste of blueberry," and we're like, we could buy a bunch of them, have them go bad in the fridge, and have to throw them away.
Yeah.
But right, like our body is looking for high reward foods like fat and sugar, and unfortunately, here, especially in the United States, a lot of food is built that way, designed that way, because they want to make money.
Yeah, they want to sell the food.
Yeah. So that's actually a good segue, Melissa, because now we got done with the boring biochemistry part, right, of understanding insulin and cortisol. How do we address this? People are saying, okay, yeah, my insulin is high, but what can I do to kind of get rid of that or maybe lower it?
Right. So I think in reading the articles that you sent me.
Good job, Melissa.
My eyes were crossing a little bit, but I think that lifestyle has a lot to do with it, which is kind of my area. But, definitely making changes and expecting a gradual result is the main thing, because if we do suddenly say go from eating all day every day to eating nothing, that's going to automatically trigger our body to slow down our metabolic rate and slow down that process of weight loss, because our body is programmed to not lose weight. We really, have been programmed to maintain weight at all costs, because that's how we survived for, all this time until now that food is abundant. We haven't quite reversed that. So mainly the changes have to be slow.
I like that. Yeah, I think that's point number one is rapid weight loss or rapid changes actually never work. And I think most studies show that if we lose more than about a pound, maybe at most 2 a week, you're right, the body kicks in to stop that from happening. Most people, the way they lose weight is what we call chronic caloric restriction. By restricting calories, cutting 500 calories a day. If you do the math, 500 calories a day, every single day for a week, you should lose. But what we find out is as you lose, you'll lose quickly in the beginning, but then it gets harder to lose. And I think most of our patients that have tried to lose weight have fought with this. They'll lose really fast and almost like it plateaus. And that essentially is a sign that the body is like, wait. I'm not losing fast enough. So it will literally slow its metabolism down to match the calorie that it's taking in, which then people plateau, they get frustrated, they eat again, and then actually the metabolism doesn't speed back up as fast as the calories coming in, and so most people will gain their weight back and maybe even more. And that was actually proven in a Minnesota starvation study back in World War II, which is a 2,000-page.
Don't send me that.
No, you don't want to read that. That one is it's not fun. I just had to skim. It's like Cliff Notes. Somebody's had to Cliff Note this for me. But essentially, yeah, you're right. It has to be slow. It has to be steady. It has to be at a pace that maybe your body realizes that, okay, this is okay. I'm losing a little bit, but I'm not starving. It's not like I'm going to, never eat again.
Right. And I think people do get frustrated with that just because they want to see those more instant results. But when you really think about it, to do a manageable rate of weight loss, you're losing, half a pound to 2 pounds at most a week. So right there in the middle, if you're doing a pound a week, that's only 4 pounds in a month. So that's frustrating for people. And I get that. But when we really start looking back, it maybe took a decade, 2 decades or more to get where you're at today. So just knowing that it's a gradual process to get where you want to go is the way to do it, just because that's the most sustainable way and that's the best way to be successful. Yeah, actually, based on studies, most people gain about 2 pounds a year. So you're right. It's very gradual. It's very slow. Now, right, you talk about 25 years, that's 50 pounds. But it's kind of like you said, the body doesn't like to move one way or the other. So if it gains, unless you're using hormones that you shouldn't be using, you should not be gaining weight
rapidly like that, because the body has mechanisms to try to stop that from happening, and vice versa. You shouldn't be losing weight drastically because the body will do things to stop that from happening as well. Now, going back to the insulin thing, since Melissa, you're a lifestyle person, we know certain foods will raise your insulin more than other foods. Now, if people want to get super technical, they can look at glycemic index or glycemic load, which kind of gives you a list of foods that really spike sugar, which really spikes insulin. But is there a rule of thumb that you usually use to try to figure out what foods will raise sugar a lot and what foods don't?
Well, I think number one is whether it's highly processed or not. Most of the time when foods are going to spike sugar, it's because they've been stripped of all their fiber, maybe even, lacking in protein or other nutrients that we need to kind of slow those sugar spikes. And we see that in highly processed, highly refined, high sugar foods. So I usually tell people eating things closest to their most natural form is the way to go. So a potato is okay, but it's what we do to the potato that makes it bad.
Correct.
So we turn it into French fries or potato chips or loaded baked potato. It's usually all the stuff that we add to it that makes it not as good for us. So eating that closer to its most natural form is usually the way to go.
Yeah, I've had many vegetarians like, I'm going vegetarian, I'm going to be healthier, I just eat
Oreos.
Oreos and Doritos and French fries. So that's, I guess, rule number one, shopping on the outside of the stores are helpful. Because you're right, most of the things in the aisles, they're processed. And, in the beginning, they were processed because, we didn't have big fridges. We wanted things to keep and store longer. And so the processing, especially dealing with the fats and stuff like that, helps food stay better longer. But unfortunately, you're right. The way the body absorbs that is very different. And for those people that say like a calorie is a calorie, 100 calories of broccoli is very different than 100 calories from a Snickers bar.
Yeah.
Right? They're not even in the same stratosphere. How your body absorbs them, how it processes them, the fiber in the broccoli. I've never seen somebody get obese eating 100 calories of broccoli.
No.
But definitely with Snickers bar, it can happen. So to deal with that insulin spike, to make sure that thing doesn't spike, you're right. Number one, stop. So the canned cranberry for Thanksgiving. That one.
What's actually in the can?
Yeah.
Is it really cranberries? Just pureed and smushed together?
Yeah, and probably with a bunch of sugar added to it.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think, that, like I said.
And it turns into like a congealed substance.
So, yeah.
So just eat the cranberries.
There you go. Yeah, just eat the cranberry. Because like you said, the fiber, the way the nature designed the fruit, there's fiber in there. There's things like that help the body actually block the sugar absorption. And so when you strip that all away, that includes things like apple juice. I have patients like, I don't drink Coke. I don't drink Sprite. I just drink apple juice. And I'm like, or liquid sugar. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, all the fiber's gone, and it's just a very concentrated form of sugar.
Exactly. The second thing I would say for most people is so that's tip number one, processed stuff.
Yes.
Just do your best. I mean, you don't have to have zero, but just know that if you want to go on this weight loss journey, try to limit those will be very, very helpful. Like if we had to do one thing, that would be helpful. I think the second thing that most people don't realize is the artificial sweeteners. So they actually can make your body release insulin as well, which I don't think it releases as much as, say, like Coke. So like if you looked at a Coke Zero or a full Coke, they're not equal on the way the body releases insulin. But most people, what they do is, I'm drinking a Diet Coke. It's not full Coke, so I just drink 8. And you're like, no, that's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Add some water in there.
Yeah.
Maybe one Diet Coke. I don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, if the skinny of it, and I've seen most cases, like if patients, like people who drink a lot of sweet tooth, drink a lot of Coke, they just cut back to water. A lot of people actually just start losing weight instantly from cutting liquid sugar. And this includes alcohol, like alcoholic beverages with juices and stuff added in. So, number 2, we got to do that. The third thing, these heavy protein diets that a lot of people are eating, believe it or not, protein also releases insulin.
Okay.
Yeah. So when patients heavy load on protein, that also actually increases insulin levels in the body. Now, the whole idea with like Atkins keto is that if you have fat, which fat actually doesn't increase it as much, like the healthy fats like avocados, olive oil, but the idea is, okay, if you eat more protein and fat, you just don't eat as much because your body should feel fuller. So I guess the pitfall for a lot of people going heavy protein is if you eat the same amount calorie-wise, it's not going to help you, which is not.
That makes sense though. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you're going to eat a bunch of like high-fat, bacon and all that stuff.
Right. And that also, we do see worsening insulin resistance sometimes with those diets too. So I guess that's why that would be the case.
Yeah. I think one pitfall I always tell people, like, when we tell people eat more fruits and vegetables, it's actually hopefully to replace some of the other things. So, like, if you eat the same and just add fruits and vegetables, you might not get the same benefits. But the whole thing is, like, if you eat more fruits and vegetables, replacing those is kind of like the key.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it does eventually crowd some of the other stuff out because fruits and vegetables can be filling, they're full of fiber and all kinds of good stuff. So even if we add those to our plate, a lot of times we'll eat less of other foods.
Yeah. So that's our number 3.
Yes.
Right. Exercise. Melissa, how often, I guess, in lifestyle medicine do you recommend exercise for patients?
Yeah, so a good goal for most people is to get about 150 minutes a week just to maintain good health in general. Now, if we're working on weight loss, closer to 180 minutes, is usually a little bit more. But I do tell people anything as small as 10 minutes is beneficial, at least for your cardiovascular health and things like that. And it adds up over time. So if we're needing 150 minutes a week, you can do 10 minutes on the days that is all you can get. And then maybe on days where you can get more, maybe 40 minutes or whatever. But as long as it averages out to about 150 minutes a week, that's a good place to start.
Yeah. And like I said, I like what you said. I mean, I had a patient, story time. He told me that, I don't have time to exercise. I don't have 3 hours a day. And I was like, 3 hours a day?
Who exercises?
Are you The Rock? No, I mean, you don't need that. And I think, one common misperception is like, I have to go to the gym to do something, which I know, like, I work out usually at the house. You work out at home.
Yes.
Use an app.
Yeah, an app at home or my treadmill or running around the neighborhood, so everything that I do is at home or on our trail right out here by the clinic.
Yes.
So, but ultimately everything can be done at home.
Yeah. I've seen, like I said, YouTube, there's free workouts. I mean, it's all there. And you're right, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, stand up, jump around during commercial break. Like, there's a bunch of things that we can do with. But the idea is, again, exercise makes your muscles use sugar more efficiently. It decreases insulin resistance because it makes your body demand the sugar because it needs to become more efficient. And overall, it can help maybe not move the scale down per se because people usually get more muscle, so they weigh the same. But most people, like the waist circumference will get smaller, their clothes will fit better. And that actually is a really good predictor of disease, is how wide your waist is.
Yes. And you can actually see those improvements in your metabolic health without much movement in the scale. So we can even see someone who's been on a pretty consistent exercise program and watching diet for a few months, we'll see improvements in metabolic health as far as blood pressure, blood sugar, things like that, but not always a huge drop in weight. But that being said, people that lose weight will see improvement in their metabolic health too.
Correct.
So even if that's your only goal, you're still going to still see improvement either way.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. Like, we want people to live longer, live better quality of life. Obviously, being fitter prevents falls, helps with back pain, knee pain, joint pain. From the hormone standpoint, it actually also lowers your cortisol level, right? Because if you're in this fight or flight mode all day long, you need some kind of, like, outlet.
You need the flight. Yeah. So you need to actually expend some of that energy, and that lowers your stress levels, lowers those cortisol levels, and overall just feel better.
Yeah, perfect. And I guess, now I guess moving to cortisol, the stress management, crucial. mindfulness, meditation, something that we do, yoga, these things, stretching, sleep, right? Sleep lowers cortisol levels too by controlling that. All these things play a role in helping people lose weight, lower their cortisol, lower their insulin levels, keep the weight off. And these are healthy habits that oftentimes we ignore here in the United States.
Yeah, I think it's easy to just get busy. And I think, like we talked about a few weeks ago, choosing the more important things that are urgent right now. And then these things that we know we need to be doing, like taking care of our sleep, exercise, diet, they get put on the back burner because they're maybe just not top of the priority list.
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough. And we understand, like I said, you work full-time, mom full-time, kids, it's wife, nonstop. Obviously I have a bajillion kids. It's like I'm trying to repopulate the earth. And it is, but it's like these things, taking care of yourself might not be an urgent thing that you need to do right now this minute, but the long term, it's super important. And so definitely quality of life in the future, something we want to consider, moving up the priority list. We tell people making first things first.
And little changes over time. Just start with one and then add to that as you go.
Which I guess, this brings us kind of to our closing thoughts, Melissa. Because obviously we talked on the big hormones, but people have questions on little hormones.
Yes. Other hormones. So what hormones do people request the most?
We see estrogen a lot, progesterone, testosterone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Always. And thyroid, too.
Thyroid.
A lot of people like to dig for thyroid problems, and then maybe they find somebody to put them on some thyroid medication, and then they end up in AFib.
That's right.
Which is not what you want to go for.
Correct. Yeah. These hormone replacement is not a benign science.
No.
There is definitely side effects with it. So, some people need it. If a guy comes in, had testicular cancer, lost testicles, they need testosterone replacement, right?
Yes.
But most guys don't. And I think reading all these papers and figuring out the point that I'm seeing, and I've seen a lot, is the reason a patient's testosterone is low, it's not like it's low and then everything bad started happening. Is they weren't eating well. They weren't sleeping well. Their stress is through the roof. They weren't exercising. And because of all those things, the body is like, not a good time to be having a child, I can't even take care of my own stuff, and so the testosterone level goes down because of the things that we're doing. And so if we change those things, the testosterone level actually naturally goes up.
Yeah. And I think that's a take-home point with a lot of hormones. A lot of it, hormones, is a result of what we're already doing, whether that's increasing our insulin levels or decreasing our testosterone or whatever the case may be. A lot of it comes from lifestyle first. So,
see, full circle.
Full circle.
See, Melissa, we'll have job security forever because we're all about the lifestyle. And which, like I said, I think paper after paper, when we read it, it's rarely something bad happens and now the body's respond. Most of the time, we're not treating our body well. Bad things happen. So
that's right. So treat your body well.
Melissa, I think we did a thing.
Yeah.
We covered all our points. I checked on paper. Slow and steady, consistency. Now you understand. I think now, hopefully, people listening to this understand what's going on hormonally in their body. And then now that you know what's going on, how to address this, why it matters what we do, I think that will help people better understand their health. What should we talk about next week?
What's up next?
You know what would be really fun to go over is holiday foods.
Yes, we did talk about that. So yeah, we should. And let's do that, plus preparing your New Year's resolutions, like maybe avoiding those fad diets.
Oh,
yes,
that'd be good because another one's coming.
Yes,
it's just a matter of time.
And everybody right now is kind of deciding what they're going to do after the first of the year, and that'd be a good point to discuss.
We might need a special guest.
Yeah,
one of our coaches.
Yeah.
I just got to convince them to come on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Melissa, always appreciate hanging out with you.
Yes, you too.
We have a good time. All right. Talk to you later.
All right.